right, well, let's begin with, we're going to talk today about capitalism and joint stock companies. Well, first, let me give you a definition of what capitalism is and why this is going to be important. Capitalism is it's an economics, and it's a belief that people have the right to pursue their own self-interest and the right to own private property. So capitalism is associated with private property. If you believe in capitalism, you believe that the state exists to protect individual rights, and that individuals are free to decide whether to invest their money, their property, in what to produce or sell and what prices to charge. So if you're making shoes, you have the right to sell your shoes and make a profit off it. If you're going to go out and buy land, you have a right to go get land and go sell it. There's no natural limit to the range in their efforts in terms of asset sales or profits. And capitalism gets its beginning with a man named Adam Smith, who wrote a book called Wealth of the Nations in 1776. And it's not a surprise that it begins in England, which basically gets rid of their king, and their king comes back. They have a constitution of monarchy, but where individual rights are more valued in England than in other nations in Europe. All right, so early settlers of what will become the United States brought with them capitalism. In 1607, the settlers at Jamestown arrived under a charter of the Virginia Company of London. Basically, they were coming and they were basically a corporation. How this worked was people in England, pretty much they saw that there was this new colony out there that they had, that England, the crown had in North America, and they wanted to make money off it. And they wanted to own the property and make money off that property. Now, of course, they're neglecting the fact that people are already living there. The American Indians are already living there. But unfortunately, with smallpox coming in and wiping out a large number of the people who are living there, there isn't as much of a resistance as there could be to the English settlers coming in to take the land. So the settlers come in, they see the land, they want to make profit off it. And that's what starts the Virginia Company of London. What they do is they basically tell people, I want to go over, I want to take these ships, and I want to make some money in Jamestown. We're going to grow a bunch of this new product called tobacco that is all the rage in Europe, and people like to smoke now. So we're going to grow a whole bunch of tobacco, and we're going to make money off it. But people didn't have enough money on their own to go fund the ships, to fund the farmers, everything to go over there. So what they would do is they would actually sell stock. They would sell part of the company. So they would say, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to sell you this piece of paper, contract. It says that you can own 5% of my company. And if we make profit, you're going to get 5% of the profits. So if we go over to Jamestown and we start making money, every time we make profit, you're going to make a dividend or a share of that money. So you get a whole bunch of investors over. You use their money to buy your ships. You recruit people who want to go over there and work over there. And then they start growing tobacco, and you sell it, and you make profit. And the shareholders who invested their money in this company make money in this corporation. So realistically, America, as it's beginning, the United States of America, does really begin as a corporation or a company at Jamestown. There's another colony that's founded in 1630 by Puritans in England. And this is called the Massachusetts Bay Company. And that is more for religious reasons. So the proprietors of the Virginia Company were interested mainly in revenues from tobacco. Those of the Massachusetts Bay Company cared less about profit, and they wanted to set up what their leader John Winthrop called a city on a hill. They wanted to demonstrate for all humanity the virtues of moderately living basically as God's example. Now, they could make some money, that's okay, but they wanted to live a Christian, pure life. They wanted to be the city on a hill that everyone could see. That would be the example of how to live a Christian life. And there was another English corporation that decided to make a lot of money in this area. And it is going to be called the Royal African Company, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So the first people who went over to Jamestown were indentured servants. These were people who would serve for a number of years. So what you would do is you'd have your corporation, and you'd tell these poor people who were living in England that, yes, you don't have any land here, but if you go over to Jamestown, what will happen is we can have you live there. You can live a contract of about 7 years. And while you're living there for 7 years, What will happen is after that contract's done, you'll be free and you'll even get some land. You can never have land in England. They're too poor. There's no way they'd ever be able to get land. But in this new colony that they're funding out in Jamestown in Virginia, they can have land after 7 to 10 years. So what first happens in Jamestown, the indentured servants... Oh, one second. So indentured servants were brought in who were poor and they would work the land. Now, what happened was, at first this worked out well, and a lot of indentured servants were happy to come over. They were happy to try to get new land. But unfortunately, a lot of people died in Jamestown as they were coming in. And after a while, word got back to England that, things weren't so good in Jamestown. So indentures didn't want to come anymore from Europe. Now, the first Africans who come over is really interesting, because the first Africans who come over to Jamestown around 1619 is when the first African comes. They are not slaves. They are also indentured servants. So the first Africans are indentured servants who come over. They are not slaves in America. So the first African Americans in America, in Jamestown colony, indentured servants, same as the Europeans. They're even able to own land. There are a number of free Africans who come and are owning land in Jamestown. But what happens is gradually the laws change. And what happens is by the 1650s, into the 1670s, we see that slavery becomes the institution. And then what happens is they make the African slave because it's easy to see that they're different than other people based on race. They're from a different continent. And word doesn't get back to Africa about the indentures like it does in Europe, where people are like, you might die if you come over here, so they don't come. So what happens is slavery starts to form, and what we see is there's a corporation that actually makes money, a legitimate business in England that makes money off this. And there are businesses in Portugal and Spain that do this as well. And it's called the Royal African Company. So the Royal African Company actually gets its start, and it is a slave business out of England. It is the corporation, just like Jamestown was a corporation. People are literally buying shares, trying to make profits off slavery. So the Royal African Company starts in 1672 with the idea of making profits for its shareholders. And it starts just after, pretty soon it's been established that Africans in North America will be slaves. So eventually, many thousands of white merchants, they stopped coming, and pretty soon it becomes more of a slave market. Now what we'll see is the total number of Africans who get transported to the New World is going to be between 10 and 12 million. Now many do come to Jamestown, but it's actually not the majority. 1 out of every 17 come to the United States, period. The main destination for slaves, as we'll see in our next unit, is the Caribbean islands with sugarcane, and also Brazil, with sugarcane becomes the big product to grow to in plantations. Now, so the indentures stop coming, and slavery takes over as the institution. So tobacco has an enormous influence on the life in Virginia. The life involves around tobacco because they want to make a profit off it. And again, the transition goes from being indentured servants to being slaves. And Jamestown, as a company, becomes the first settlement in what will become the United States. Now, capitalism gets closely tied to another system, which is called mercantilism. Now, basically, mercantilism is another system where we can describe by Adam Smith, the economist, who also came up with capitalism. Mercantilism is the system to describe the political economy that sought to enrich the country by restraining imports and encouraging exports. So on mercantilism, what a country wants to do is basically, it wants to go to another country, one of its colonies. It wants to use their natural resources, turn them into a finished product, and then sell them. Real basically, we can see this with England here in India. What England would want to do is they would go to India, they would get their raw goods, something like cotton, and they would make shirts. Then they would sell the shirts to as many people as they could, including India. Now, if you think about this for a moment, you're like, wait a minute, how's India going to benefit out of this? Well, India doesn't. The mother country benefits, the country that's doing the colonialism, that's going in and taking over. So England takes over a place like India, takes their cotton, makes shirts, sells it to other people around the world, including India. India does not get richer. They lose some of their resources. Selling resources, they're selling the resources at a low price because England can charge what they want for the price since they own India. They've taken India over. And they sell that around the world. It's a way for England to become rich. England did this in the United States. They did this with tobacco in the United States, and it's why, actually one of the biggest reasons that caused the revolution was because they were exploiting or taking advantage of the former indentured servants who were living in America. Now, if we look at here, we see mercantilism. It's something that Europe did around the world. It was done in parts of Africa, especially with slaves, which was seen as a resource in capitalism. So capitalism says you can make a private profit off anything. This would include slaves. So slaves were considered property, so they could make a profit off selling humans. Capitalism did not have limits on that in this era. So what you can see is in all these lands, South America, North America, India, you would see countries like France, Spain, England would go in and would take the resources out and would sell them as finished products for a profit. And that was the goal of mercantilism. And using this, we see Europe continues to develop and continues to get richer, and many of the places whom they take over, and again, North America, South America, we know that because of smallpox, many of the native population was wiped out, so they could take advantage of these resources. They take advantage of the native labor. When that goes away, they go to Africa and get slaves, which we'll talk about more in the next unit. But this is a way for Europe to grow in strength and Europe to gain power through capitalism and mercantilism.